Hey everybody, this is Scoots. This is a new kind of experimental version of Sleep With Me we've never done before. So welcome. These are just bedtime stories from our podcast, Sleep With Me. And to make them feel fresh, these ones are from a couple of years ago. So if you're a regular listener, you might get a refresh. And if you're new, these are just bedtime stories from a show called Sleep With Me. They're strange, they're meandering, they're a little bit different. And all this is made possible by listeners like you, regular listeners like you. And so I just want to let you know that's how we're able to put the show out. And so if you are a fan of Sleep With Me, you listen to it on a regular basis, please consider supporting the show. You get ad-free episodes, you get ad-free story-only episodes, tons of other cool stuff at Sleep With Me Plus. That's sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus. But if you're in a position and you have some money every month, or you say, hey, maybe I don't watch that streaming service, I'd rather give it to a podcast, think about your favorite podcast. It doesn't have to be Sleep With Me, and support that podcast. If it is Sleep With Me, I consider supporting the show, would be great. But if it isn't, or there's a podcast you listen to way more, brings you a lot of value during the day, please support that podcast. Podcasting's going through a different time right now, and your favorite podcast, the one you get the most out of, could use your support the most. So consider supporting it however they request support. Just check it out, like listen to the show or check out their website, or consider supporting Sleep With Me. If Sleep With Me, you say, oh no, Sleep With Me is the one I listen to the most, sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus. Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and friends beyond the binary, it's time for a podcaster who just, like, I was going to record an intro for another, this is super meta, but I was going to record an intro for one type of episode, and then I just thought, has there ever been a spinoff of This Old House called This Old Boat? And then I said, I don't remember one. And I said, well, better do an episode about it then, because that sounds like incredibly like in Sleep With Me-esque. So probably at some point, like in the 20 minutes from now, I may be talking about This Old Boat, but I'll probably talk about it sooner, and then I'll go off top. You see, you never even mentioned boats or old boats at all, Scoots. And I'd say, Scoots, what's your favorite old boat? And I'd say, well, the boat in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but I wanted to see it. A lot of people said, well, I want that Bucky cut with Bucky and Sarah, but I want to see the boat cut. Like, I want to see that boat, like, out in the ocean or the harbor, please. And I wanted to see if it was named or renamed to something, because I say, well, I have a couple ideas from the arc of the season. So anyway, but what am I talking about? It's time for Sleep With Me podcast to put you to sleep. Hey, everybody, this is Scoots. This is a quick message here. If you get a lot out of Sleep With Me, if you're a regular listener, you like these new things we're trying out, like the story-only version of the show. If you're new, don't worry about any of this. But if you're a regular listener of Sleep With Me, or you're a regular listener of any podcast, if you have a favorite podcast, and it's not Sleep With Me, that's totally cool. If you have podcasts you listen to way more, or you get way more value out of, I totally understand that. Consider supporting that podcast. Podcasting as an industry is kind of going through a weird phase right now. Direct support from listeners is going to be, it seems like it's going to be the future of most shows. And so consider supporting the podcast you really love. And you could do that. You could find out, you could listen to the show and see how they ask to be supported, or reach out to them and say, hey, how can I support you? Or if you can't afford, a few dollars a month, you say, hey, how else can I support you? But if Sleep With Me is the one, Sleep With Me Plus is the best way to support Sleep With Me. Sign up for Sleep With Me Plus. Not only you get an unbelievably sweet, different ways to listen to the show, but it's a huge help for us to be able to do stuff like this. But yeah, think about what your favorite podcast is, and then go ahead and go to their website, or if you already know how they like to be supported, support that show. Thanks and good night. All right, everybody. This is Scoots here. This came up in the intro. I did not expect this, but this is an episode that'll be called This Old Boat. And even as I've been saying to myself for the past, I said, what is this going to be about? And I say, I don't know. But there was a show that I didn't really watch. I saw it was satirized as a kid. It looks like it's still on the air. I'm going to read the Wikipedia article about it. It looks like it has a new cast. When I was a kid, the show was called This Old House. And Bob Villa was on it, Villa. And Bob Villa it was like one of those PBS. It was like similar to Rick Steves, but it was This Old House. Bob Villa was on it. I think at some point, like Bob Villa had was doing ads for True Value and had like Bob Villa brand stuff at True Value. But oh wow, Bob Villa hasn't presented it since 1989. Then it was Steve Thomas from 89 to 2003, Kevin O'Connor 2003 to present. And different stars of the show. Honestly, I've never owned a house, so I've never really watched the house. In my entire adult life, I've never even really realistically thought about owning a house. I mean, even kind of, I've always lived in the Bay Area, so it's just been something I've been like, well, it's probably just not for me. I mean, if I lived somewhere that wasn't a major metropolitan area, I might think about it, but even for me, I just personally, I don't know, I tend to be contrarian about stuff you're supposed to grow up and do. So that was another thing where I was like, no, I'm not going to own a house. And then living in the Bay Area, it's just something, it's just a different area where you're I'm like, I don't know, that's too much, comes with too much. But let's read about This Old House since I don't know anything about it really. Oh, it had a sister series. It wasn't called This Old Boat, but This Old House had a sister series, Ask This Old House. They were often broadcast together as the This Old House Hour or the New This Old House Hour. They were underwritten by GMC and the Home Depot and lumber distributor, the one Weyerhaeuser. They were paying $1 million a year as an underwriter. Also, insurance companies, different things underwritten the show. And the third series was Inside This Old House. So know This Old Boat, but soon, reach out. You could borrow the name from me. The Renovation Guide on the Learning Channel. The classics are still carried on commercial on the DIY network. And syndicated. It was one of the earliest home improvement shows. We're not going to do a recap of This Old House. I'm just, it started as a one-time 13-part series on WGBH, and it grew as one of the more, it's produced spin-offs, New Yankee Workshop, 17 Emmys and 82 nominations. There was their first two projects were in Dorchester and Newton. And it was always focused on renovating older homes, including those of modest size and value. Oh, with the same sweat equity kind of thing that they use in a lot of the shows. These are shows, I don't have anything against these shows. It's just not my thing. But I do watch them on other people's screens on airplanes. I tend to watch a lot of that, like Property Brothers, on airplanes, but when other people are watching it. Is that the show Property Brothers, I think? But that goes for other genre shows. Shark Tank, I've never seen it, and there's other shows like that. I did watch one episode of Shark Tank recently. I think that's by accident. I don't even know how I accidentally watched that, but usually I watch those on airplanes as well while other people are watching it. I watched one, it wasn't Shark Tank, but it was something like it where this was like 4 years ago. And then I started watching it because it was on demand on the plane because they were working with key lime pies. Anyway, shows you watch on airplanes, watch other people watching. Oh yeah, Bob Villa started his competing show, because he was making commercials, that weren't working with the underwriters. It's tough being a content creator. But during Villa's tenure, there was 11 million viewers. Let's see. Then Kevin O'Connor. Anyway, I don't know. There's a lot about it, but I think that's the most important thing was that that it was just a show. So then I was thinking it was, the only important part was that it was about fixing up old houses. So then I thought of like this old boat, like I said, and I said, well, there's probably, I mean, here's the thing. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about fixing stuff or remodeling stuff. I mean, for me, remodeling would be like getting enough stuff off the floor to vacuum. That's like a remodel. That's like a heavy duty sweat equity remodel where I live. But it got me thinking, this old boat sounds nice. That sounds like a show I would probably not watch either. And then I thought of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because they were working on an old boat, and I enjoyed that too. Though I did, again, I think I said it maybe in the intro of another episode. I would have liked to see those two or the whole fam out on the boat, on the water, like that cut of the episode. So anyway, if you want to put me in touch with whoever's in charge, Malcolm Spellman is in charge of it. One of the great TV show runners and guests of Script Notes podcast. Script Notes, not Script Notes. That's a different podcast. But so what was my point? So okay, so I was thinking about this old boat, right? And I had a couple days to think about it since the intro, because I said, well, what would we do it about? And then I said, part of me was like, oh, let's do something fantastical. But then I said, well, we could do like a personal essay style one and see where it goes. Because of the boats, like the boats that I've encountered in my life. And then I started thinking about it. I said, okay, so let's start with, we've never been a big boat family. But after I said that to myself, then I started thinking about the boats in our lives. These are the boats of our lives, like boats on an hourglass lake. And those are all old boats. So I said, okay, these are the boats of my past. And we will have to go with a broad definition of boats, if that's okay with everybody, which I think hopefully it is. And we'll take a little journey here, and there'll probably be other boats that bob right up out of my subconscious. And I think the boats should be split, at least initially, into what I can remember and particular lakes. And I guess you can't really talk about Syracuse, Central New York, lakes without talking about Onondaga Lake, which hopefully one day I will take a boat out on. When I was a kid, Onondaga Lake, you couldn't go, you could walk on the shore of it, but it's this really big lake in the city of Syracuse. Or I guess maybe part of it is in Salve in North Syracuse. But I don't know. I don't think I've been on a boat on Onondaga Lake, but I think you can go on a boat on Onondaga Lake now. So that's Lake 1. I just thought of another boat story. So hopefully we'll get to Skinny Atlas Lake, because I have 2 boats I encountered there. And those would be in my middle school, 6th grade, or 5th, 6th grade to high school years. But let's go further back, to elementary grammar school. So we're going with Oneida Lake. Is that right? Is that the name of the lake? And Oneida Lake. Now, Oneida Lake runs kind of along the New York State Thruway, and it's a bigger lake. It's still very close to the city of Syracuse. On the outskirts of Brewerton is a lake, not very sure about directions, northwestern or northeastern edge of the lake. And this lake was a big part of my childhood. And just a few boats that we encountered, or floating things. So we'll talk about this. So Oneida Lake, my dad has one best friend. His name is Richard Dick. He goes by Dick and Ann. And Dick and his father, when I was a little kid, would normally have a boat. And once a year, in a motorboat, like a boat you see, not like a yacht, no yachts in this story, but like the kind of boat you take out on that you would go fishing or water skiing on. Not that there was any water skiing. I would always fantasize about it until eventually I did, but I didn't need to anymore. But so that was those were my first memories of being in a boat with an engine that I can remember. Are these times, and I guess they're lightly treasured memories. You wouldn't say they're formative memories, but I say, oh, when I think about motorboats, I think about, I guess we call him Uncle Dick, or he's my godfather, actually. So my godfather, Dick, and he would take us out on these boats, and it would be nice. We'd just take a little tour. And I believe most of the time his boat was parked somewhere near Brewerton, New York, on the Erie Canal, which I think Oneida Lake is a part of the Erie Canal system. So I'm thinking that the Erie Canal goes in one end of the Oneida Lake, and then you would traverse Oneida Lake and then rejoin for the last stretch from Oneida Lake to Lake Ontario, which nowadays has been, I think, is slowly being revitalized. Like you could kayak or pleasure boat from Oneida Lake to Lake Ontario. And again, I mean, those of us with, looking back with 2020 vision say, man, any of that Erie Canal that got filled in, that's like, let's dig that. You can't dig it up in certain places because it's like downtowns of towns and cities are over it. But oh boy, the recreational possibilities if the entire Erie Canal was still open. But let's not quibble. So, I mean, I guess I just did. But so boat rides, and all I remember is, it was a motorboat. It felt cool. It was a nice boat. And Dick would probably go fast every once in a while. And it was something kind of we did once a year on a yearly basis. Felt like a little special trip. Now, the only reason I pause is because I think that they lived in Canastota, which I think is in another lake. So I could have my lakes mixed up, but I can kind of picture Brewerton. There's a bridge that goes over where the Erie Canal meets Oneida Lake. But so that's one old boat. That was probably, of all the boats, that's probably the newest boat that we'll encounter. And I guess maybe it was one boat, maybe it was a variety of boats. I don't know. So that's boat one. Now, boat 2 and 3, these ones you'd say, Scooch, you're kind of grasping at boating straws. And I'd say, well, that's what we're here for, correct? And hopefully, now I just revisited this to see how much of my dreams, I revisited this in 2019. Hopefully in 2021, 2021, but it hasn't come yet, I will have a chance to revisit this location. So Oneida Lake has an area called Sylvan Beach, and it also has a Verona Beach, are the two kind of beach areas where you would rent a cottage. And that's where we went for, my family, there were 6 kids in my family. At other times there was 5 kids, then 4 kids, then 3 kids. And so for vacation every summer, my parents would rent a cottage on Oneida Lake. I talked about it in other times. And we would stay at this cottage, and our cottage was next door to the people that owned the cottage where they lived full time. And I don't want to say their last name, but I say, do I remember it or not? But I mean, I do remember JJ was one of the older brothers. He never wore a shirt, always had long hair, and he played the drums. Pretty much, was like, didn't even give me a time of day. But I said one day I'd like to be like JJ, and at least I achieve that mostly in the summertime by trying to wear a shirt on as little basis as I can. Don't play the drums. I guess my hair's kind of long now, but JJ, I think, had curly hair. And then JJ's brother that was my age was named Critter, or Chris. And we had friend thing going on and off, and then my brother Carl and Sheila are just 2 years younger than me. So we'd go to Sylvan Beach every year for about a week, I think. Maybe it was longer. Usually my dad, sometimes he was working still, so he could still commute to work. since it was close enough to Syracuse. Even though for a little kid, it felt like it was 4 hours away. I think it's like 45 minutes or an hour. And we went there, like, that was a big part of my childhood, was that week or 2 weeks we went there in the summer and rented that place. And I have so many memories in there, but of the boat variety, I have two. Now, this was back in the 80s, so I don't know how much my parents were paying for this cottage, but it was like, these are the kind of things that you wish you, like that are gems. Like, I have no idea. This was right on the beach. It had like a grass and a seawall and then a sandy beach. Now, there was one thing about Sylvan Beach still exists, which is like the swamp between the beach and the swimmable water. So maybe that like lowered home values, but to have like a cottage on the beach is like, that's like a lot of people's dreams. Now, I did talk about this in other stories, but like so it had this beautiful beach, probably a manufactured beach, but I don't know, because actually the swamp would keep I guess probably protected the beach. And I don't know nothing about agriculture, aquaculture or anything. But so this cottage had like a little bit of a grass, then the seawall, and then the beach. And you could sit on the beach, you could play, you could dig all the way down to the water table, so you could have muddy sand. And it was awesome. But after the sand, you came to this area. We called it muck. We called it the muck. And for about 10... Now more like 25 feet to 100 feet, there was just this, I guess, like, because of whatever the water and the sandbars, because there's a lot of sandbars, this whole lake has this sandy bottom. There was like an area of algic water, and it was very green, it was warm. And to a kid, you couldn't see to the bottom. So it's like very, vested. And it was only ankle I think the deepest it got was probably like maybe to kids to your like top of your swimsuit, your shorts. But you would have to go through that muck and then you would get to clear, beautiful swimming water. So... well, that was always a part of it, was like, do you run through it? And I started to have, like, I would imagine, like, I don't know, it's a sleep podcast, but I didn't imagine anything that, like, any antagonists in there, just fish. I don't know. That was just one of the things I would overthink of. But so even my mom had a lot of siblings. Sometimes they would try to make, like, a sand bridge through the muck, but then, the weather would change and it would get washed away. So it was always like a question of, would you run through it or would you swim, run through it or walk through it, trudge through it? And I guess with little kids, they all have their little quirks. I could see that being like, don't you want to go? No, I don't want to go swimming because I don't want to go through the muck. And I don't know, beautiful thing is it's like a shared memory with some of, not my youngest siblings because they were too young. But so you would traverse the muck and then you would get into this gorgeous water, like beautiful water, like a very sandy bottom, clear water. The wave action never had big waves, again, because they weren't crashing on the shore, but some good, water motion. And then there usually be a couple sandbars, like you could discover as you were like, just playing around. Like, especially I was a little kid. So then my older cousins or aunts and uncles, they'd go out deeper and they'd be like, hey, there's a sandbar all the way out here. So you'd go out there. And out there on the stretch of shore we were on, and I don't know who owned it. I don't know if it was the people that owned the cottage that we were staying at or it was someone else. There was always a dock out there, but I always associate docks now with something latched to the shore. So you could call this a raft. It was a wooden square, and I think it was painted red. So it was sanded, it was painted, maybe at one point it was painted green and it got painted red. This is my vague memories. And it had an anchor, so it was anchored to the ground, and I don't know what was making it float, like barrels or something. And it was it was big. I would say, like, it was big enough for if you were adults, like 3 or 4 adults could go out there and lie next to one another in sun. But and all it was a big square wood planks. There was probably a ladder to get out of the water, but usually you just push yourself up on it. It was fairly stable. And mostly all you did was go out there and jump off. And because it was sandy bottom, I mean, you would make sure. I never thought about moving it or who owned it or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, a couple, things where you wanted to make sure you didn't jump on the side with the anchor rope. So you wanted to know where the anchor rope was all the time. And yeah, you would jump off. My dad did tell me that that's like one of the places I learned to swim, and that was like very much like movies. If you were old enough to swim out to the dock without help, and then you were like, we took swimming lessons at the public pool in Burnett and Park in Syracuse, New York. That's where I technically learned to swim, or Onondaga Park. I guess partially, maybe, Burnett Park and Onondaga Park, the same thing. No. So I guess I took lessons at both of those parks. Yeah, you're right. Those are 2 different parks. Onondaga Lake Park, so through Syracuse Parks and Rec is how I really learned to swim. But so that raft was, that was that was one of our first boats. And yeah, we just spent a lot of time out there, jumping on and off and hanging out. And the older kids would be there, like my older cousins or older aunts and uncles. And I don't know, that was just a boat. Like, there's not too much else to say about it. I mean, talk about how lucky I am to have that's an archetypal thing, to have a raft that I got to experience. Like, I'm really grateful for that. And nowadays they have similar stuff that's inflatable. Like you can get one of those inflatable islands or like even a giant foam pad. The difference of those things is you can't anchor it, and it's not made of wood. But it can't really have it on a lake that gets a lot of waves or action. Like this was a fairly calm lake in the summer. And I don't know if in the winter they just left it out there and it froze or they brought it in. So that was one thing. But also another reason why this is such a treasured memory is that within walking distance, and I would say a 20-minute walking distance from where we rented our cottage towards the town of Sylvan Beach. And I guess, I missed it, luckily, as a young adult. I guess this town of Sylvan Beach had quite a reputation as, a rowdy town. I don't know if it still does, if you're between the ages of, 18 and 35, to really go and blow off steam. But I never went there for that. But so if you headed towards the town of Sylvan Beach, but besides those establishments where people would go blow off steam, I guess there's a diner. Well, I don't guess, and I forget the name of it. I think it's named after a gentleman or something. And we ate there in 2019 when I forced my family to go there. I begged my daughter, and then we begged her grandparents, and I said, I'll drive both ways. We got to go there. I have so many dreams and memories about this place. I got to do research. And it ended up that I didn't do enough research before we left, but you'll hear about that in a second. But so there's this famous diner, and they're famous for their cream pies. So we did have a good banana cream pie and a coconut cream pie there, maybe even a chocolate cream pie at this diner. And I think as a kid, we really didn't eat out much, because we had 6 kids. So I don't know if we maybe ate there once or twice. But what it was more also known for is it had a small I guess you'd call it an amusement park, but that's a little bit glamorous to call it an amusement park. But as a kid, it seemed like the greatest place in the world. And it had a playland, what do you call that, with the rubber balls game? Funco? No, it has It's a game where you roll the balls, you try to get them in a row. They had one in San Francisco for a long time on Market Street that closed down. But I don't know, it's like a fair game where you can win prizes. We would play that game. And they had other games that were not, like that game, at least you had a chance to win, right? You're just competing against other kids and adults playing. But they had other games, with shooting the basketball or whatever. That we didn't play, but we definitely played that game. Oh, I almost remembered it and then I forgot it. But and then they had a what do you call it? The ride, like one of those rides, like where you get in and then you go and you have surprises. Evening surprise ride that I talked about, and that one's still there. And to be honest, as a kid, you would want to go on it. I think you'd pay. We would get to go down there every once in a while because, you have to pay for everything. And we would go on that ride. It was not exactly, what are those rides called? I talked about it on the Girl from Amusement Park. But, pretzel ride. And it was not exactly enthralling, but they had that. Then they had a fun slide, like the kind you see at a street fair nowadays. And sometimes we'd get to do that, but that one wasn't exactly, if you had like $5 to spend, you usually would try to go on, you wouldn't use it on the fun slide because you say, well, that's $1, like to go down 3-level slide. I could just go on a slide at a playground like 3 times in a row. So they had that. They had the bobsled spinning around, go fast ride, which probably we would do, and maybe they added that on. At one time, they had a fun house, and then, like, some stuff they lost. Like, in the fun house, that was pretty cool. Like, I remember that would be a highlight, and maybe it was more expensive, because I don't remember doing it more than once a year, but it, like, had the thing you go through, the spinning, like, room, and the mirrors and stuff, and then I think they also had a more advanced evening adventure house, a house of evening adventures around the house, like that was open all the time, but, themed towards the Halloween season. And I don't know if we ever went to that, but I thought, like, that one ended up, that one went away too. But so the pretzel ride, the fun slide is still there. The bobs are still there. Maybe they had a small, like a tiny Ferris wheel. They had food and drinks. So I don't ever remember eating food or drink there. And then they had a couple of kiddie rides. And so at first we went there for the kiddie rides. And there was a kiddie ride where you got to ride like a fake motorcycle that was just attached, it was all like, just went in a circle. It was attached to, there was like 2 motorcycles. It was like basically a carousel. And then they had one that was a boat ride. So this is boat number 3, this old boat. And the boats were painted in like blue and red and yellow colors. I think they were wooden. They even had like, you could pretend you were, like, even though it's just you were sitting in a boat, I think it had a steering wheel and maybe like a little, like a finger cannon with a sound effect. But it was just a carousel ride. I think they also had that same version of that ride in a plane version. So that was boat number 3. And so in 2019, I went there and I said, please, can we go there? I think I was begging for a while. And there was one day where it wasn't raining, and I broke my parents down. I said, please, can we just drive there? It will drive both ways. I'll pay for the gas, please, please, please. So the day I didn't happen to check the website, and because, this was even in 2019, they were only open, the like amusement park thing was only open like on the weekends or something. So hopefully I'll return and get to ride some of the rides. I mean, that's on my goals. Hashtag dream big, but it is cool. I mean, I really feel full of gratitude that, some of the stuff still exists in some manner for me to go exploring and to bring my daughter along. 'Cause it's not so much nostalgia for me as like an investigation into reality. I don't know if you ever feel that way. But it's not like, oh boy, I want to go and have my daughter ride that same boat I rode. I just am like, I guess it's like where the simulation thing, it's like, was any of that real? What does it look like now? And I don't know, I have fun with like that when you see something you were at and it looks different, but something looks similar. I don't know. I like doing that kind of stuff. Fascination. Is that what it was called? Those ball rolling rides? I think so. Those are called fascination parlors. So that's one round of boats. Now, this one's more embarrassing. I've talked about this on the show before, but it's been a while. So there's the Finger Lakes are famous in New York State, right? And the Finger Lakes are a bit more, I don't know, like, if all the Finger Lakes are expensive, but they can be more expensive. So we never rented a house there. They're also colder, the water, and I think they have more full-time residents. But so I did get to go in a boat. I'm going to jump ahead to high school because my friend Marnie had a boat and they had a house on Skinny Atlas Lake. And one time her dad tried to teach me to, I think we were in high school. He wanted me to learn how to water ski. And I could not get it. Like, and he kept trying and trying. It felt like we were trying for hours. He's like, don't pull, just let the boat pull you or whatever. And every time I'd go down, and we must have tried, and I just couldn't do it. Later in life, I did eventually get it. When I was in college, actually, Casey in Rochester, I was able to water ski. So I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just but I still appreciate how hard he tried to teach me how to water ski, even though it was unsuccessful. And maybe you've heard me talk about this. So I only went to summer camp once. Now, my sister worked at a summer camp. I don't know what lake that was on. She worked at a 4-H summer camp. And so some of my younger siblings got to go to that camp while she was working there or before or after. And there's a summer camp. Now, when I found out how much these summer camps cost, this was in 2018, I said, holy cow. And again, it might just be, it was so inexpensive that I was like, are you sure that's really the price for a week to send a kid to summer camp? But I think part of it is being in the Bay Area and becoming a little, but so for one week, I went to summer camp when I was in, I think it was between 5th and 6th grade, but it could have been between 6th and 7th grade. And what's amazing is I was already the person I am today, even back then. I mean, different, but I was very introverted. I was able to make friends, but I was I struggled with the same things I struggle with today. So I think that's always interesting to me. At the time, my best friend's name was Bo. And I think my sister and my brother also went at the same time, but we were separated by ages into cabins. And my brother Carl says that I was in the honor cabin, but I don't know what that means exactly. I don't know if we always kept our cabin the cleanest or something. And that was a bit like the movies, but before I went, I'd watched this one movie with Bo over and over again about summer camp. So I had an incredibly fictional version of what summer camp was like. So, of course, it did not meet my expectations because I was expecting it to be like in the movies. It still was a great experience, and I appreciate my parents doing it. But one of the things, and this I talked about, but this is also a boat experience. So we were on the older end of kids. Probably you don't go to summer camp once you hit 7th grade or something. I don't know what the year is, the cutoff age. But so Bo and I were some of the older kids. So I remember when you got there, your parents drop you off, they leave. At some point on the first day or a day and a half, you'd have to take a swim test so that you say, okay. And even then, swimming lessons were a part of it. But if you wanted to be able to take out a canoe, you had to pass a swimming test, obviously, because they wanted to make sure you can swim, even though you wore life jackets and everything. And I remember taking the swim test because the only swimming stroke I struggle with, which some reason to become an advanced swimmer in the eyes of New York State or Onondaga County, you had to do the side stroke. That was the only stroke I could not get down. And I don't mean to brag, but I mean, like, as far as freestyle or backstroke, I mean, I could swim, you know, I'm really, like, it's been something I've always been adept at. But so Bo and I passed our tests, and then it was like one of the early days, maybe even the first day. I think it was probably the first day, because of course this, I am who I am. It affected me for a few days. You could take out a canoe, and maybe, yeah, because it was the first day, there wasn't any structured activity because it was like Saturday or Sunday. So, but it was probably Bo. I don't know if it was Bo's idea or my idea, but we're like, wait, let's take a canoe out. So you go to the canoe and check in. You say, okay, got your swimming. Okay, you passed your swimming test. Great. Okay, if you used your canoe before, I was like, what do I look like? And they said, okay, so you know how to paddle a canoe? And maybe Bo was just getting roped on. And it's like, yeah, hey, buddy, I've been paddling canoes since before I was paddling in the water. Like, give us a paddle, give us a boat, see you later. Turns out paddling a canoe in a lake is not exactly what young Scoots thought it was. And so they had a lot of rules, like, because there was kids, they had like a free swim and they had swimming lessons where they were given those swimming tests. And there was like a big thing, like whatever line with the buoys and stuff. And the boats were never supposed to go in there because you could bump into somebody that was swimming. And I think Bo and I paddled like for about 4 paddles before I was probably in the back. We lost total control of the canoe, got hit by the wind, and then went right into the swimming area. And then all the lifeguards are like blowing their whistles and saying, hey, now I didn't realize at the time, these are like high school and college kids. To me, these are like gods and goddesses. And someone had to like dive in and push our boat. And they were like, that's it, no more canoeing for you two. So that was another boat where I was like, okay, that's it for me in canoes. And for a while, that was it for me in canoes. For the most part, I said, I wonder if this really was a formative experience. So I said, yeah, canoeing is not for me. Because, yeah, I didn't canoe again for a while. So that was but that was the Lake Skinny-Atlas. And the only other things I remember about that is like playing Foursquare once. I would get a chocolate eclair, not a chocolate eclair thing, but those like, popsicles that are called chocolate eclairs. They have the crunchy stuff on the outside. You could get a strawberry or chocolate one. And they had a canteen. That's what I got every night with my canteen money. Like, probably was like, whatever, 25 or 50 cents. That was my nightly treat. Yeah, mostly, I found myself, like Bo was a little bit more easygoing and, like, extroverted. But a lot of times I found myself just walking around, solo, in between making boondoggles. I don't even know what else you would do it. I just remember walking around a lot and eating. And I think of, like, heavy oatmeal. Okay, so that was Skinny-Atlas. Like, then we go to Lake Ontario. Old Lake Terry. And at some point, my mom and my dad and my aunt and my uncle. So my aunt and my uncle have 3 kids, John, Betsy, and Abby. And then my parents have 6 kids. And my dad knew somebody. Oh, yeah, Miss Norm. My dad had a friend, Norm. Actually, Norm had a boat, too. So this is a little, maybe we would go out on a boat with Norm, too. And actually, one of his daughters was our second babysitter, a regular babysitter, Sarah. And so Norm, he lived up on Lake Ontario. So we'd go up there for a barbecue once a year. And I think he had a boat, and we'd go out on his boat. But the area he was in Lake Ontario, at some point, and again, you think about how things have changed, I guess. Like my parents and my aunt and uncle like one of the places near Norm's, like a cabin went up for sale and they bought it. They like put their money together and they bought this thing. And I think whatever the price was at this point, I say, wait a second, you can't even like, it's like less than a year's rent in the Bay Area to buy a cabin on a lake. But so they bought this place and we would go up there. And it was like, although there was like a small upstairs and it would be packed with bunk beds because there were so many kids. And I don't know how the adults figured out. I guess I wonder where all the adults slept, but never thought about that till just now. Because downstairs there was only like one bedroom. I'll have to ask my parents about that. I'm really confused. Maybe there was another area made into a bedroom. So we shared this little cabin, and eventually, like, then another place went up to rent. It was such a deal. Like, I don't know. Then they had another cabin, or we were gonna rent one out or something. I don't remember. I was just a kid. Like, but I was like, whatever. This was like when I was in 7th grade, in 8th grade. And then, so because now my parents, like I said, we're not really boat people, but my uncle, Ed, he had a canoe, an Old Town canoe, a red Old Town canoe that he loved. And then my dad bought a used aluminum rowboat. And I think it was an watercraft. I mean, I think these things could last for like 100 years. But at some point he bought one that seems even older, but this was just like your basic aluminum rowboat, right? With oars. And at some point he bought a motor for it, but we weren't allowed to use a motor. And I think when I'm thinking of this time, like, it didn't, I think like you had to be, like in my dad's eyes, you had to be like 16 and pass your driving to even use a outboard hand holding, 4 horsepower outboard motor. But, I'm a parent. I can understand. But so we would take that, so we had that rowboat and then we had the canoe. And so some of our siblings were excluded from this because they were too little. But we were allowed, we had taken boating safety lessons at some point. And we all had swimming lessons and we all wore life jackets. But so we were allowed to take these. I guess now I'm like thinking about this. I'm like, this wouldn't fly with me as a parent. So my parents were much looser. But so we would take out the canoe and the rowboat. And of the group of us, it would be myself and my cousin John are the same age. My cousin Betsy, my brother Carl, and my sister Sheila are all within a year of each other. So all of the 5 of us are within like a 2-year age range. I think my cousin Abby, my brother Dan, and my brother Kenneth, they were like too little to be involved in boating. They had, they weren't at swimming. They weren't at had swim lessons. And then my brother Ted, who's like 5 years younger than me. So we would all go out in these 2 boats and we would do something called boat WARSs. And normally, I guess this wasn't very fair either. It would be my sister Sheila, my brother Ted, and my cousin Betsy in the canoe. And then my brother Carl, my cousin John, and I in the rowboat. I mean, the rowboat was harder to row. And we would fill up buckets or like those things with pails, like sand pails, that you used to play with sand. And the oars, and we would take the boats out and then we'd try to chase each other around and then splash each other with this river water. This is all in a river, not in Lake Ontario. And we would splash each other like giant buckets of water, like almost trying to fill up the canoe. And every once in a while, the canoe would flip and you could stand up, or like somebody would fall out of the rowboat. And it was kind of a swampy river. So you, like, if you stood up, it was never super deep, but the first like 2 or 3 feet of the bottom of the river are like old leaves and stuff. I don't remember falling in, but I must have at least once. But I definitely remember other people falling in and stuff like that. And then we, like getting everybody out, but just like, and it must have been so loud. That's what I think about now I guess as an adult. And I guess because like if you're like, the way all the cabins there are, like the river is just like, the sound just really carries there. And like, we were really loud kids. I mean, now when I go up there, I barely see any kids, or I guess my daughter's with us and maybe my sister's kids or my brother's kids, but, I guess they're not quite as rambunctious as we were. And that was like a really fun game. I don't know how, I can't remember. I'll have to ask him if that's something we did regularly or we only did it once and it just seared itself in my memory. But it was another boat. And I don't know if that boat had a name, but I really liked the original aluminum rowboat. It was very light comparatively because now we have a little bit bigger one and it had tight oar locks. And that's one thing that's underrated. And it was not super wide. So even a teenage or middle schooler, it was still hard to row. But now we have another aluminum rowboat, and it's a little bit bigger, and it has loose oar locks. And so rowing it, like, it can, even for me as an adult, can be quite tiring because it's, I don't know, it's pretty wide. I mean, not super wide. I mean, you're talking like a 3-bench rowboat. I think the other one was either a 2-bench or a 1-bench rowboat. So it's just harder to row. But then the last boat we had there was 2 boats that my parents had, which were, I guess, are they like, they're not leg-in kayaks. So I guess, and I've recorded on them, is they have 2 kayaks. They're still up there. And I guess because I never went on a canoe since my and the Old Town canoe was a flat bottom canoe. And so I probably did take that out once or twice. But I don't know. I never got into canoes. I don't know why I like kayaks and not canoes. But so my parents at some point, I don't know if this was when I was living in California and not visiting them so often before I had a kid, back when I was an independent young adult. But so at some point when I wasn't there, they got these kayaks. And I'm pretty sure they're the open sea kayak type. Can't quite picture them, but they're not the kind you stick your legs into all the way. Like you kind of sit on top kayak. I guess that's what it's called. And of course, my dad named my mom's dream boat. So I always think about that as like, that's like the only named boat that we've done so far. And I don't know if my dad's his dream boat too, or if the other one has a different name, but I always think about my mom. I think that's kind of cute personally. Is that my dad named my mom's boat Dream Boat. And they're very similar, and I usually take that out, I think in 2018 and maybe 2017 or 2016, I recorded episodes. The one of them may have been in like a rowboat, but it just because of the way we make the show now, it wouldn't work. I can't record on location episodes just because of the way we distribute the show. It just wouldn't sound good, and it just takes so much to make it sound good. But I'd take those out, and I do really like that. And then I guess a final boat I'll mention. Well, 2 things. I did do an episode about this when we went down the Wiki Wachi. I wonder what year that was. That was in the 2016, 15, maybe 17, but it couldn't have been later than that. It was when my dad was in a musical and my mom was needing some extra help. I think she had a procedure, and my brother Ted and my brother Ken and I were all there. And we went down the Wiki Wachi in kayaks. I don't know if they're sit on top or sit inside kayaks. But then about 2 years ago, 2019, 2019, I bought a stand-up paddleboard. And I don't know what turned me around on stand-up paddle boards, but originally I was not into stand-up paddle boarding. Like, I saw it, I was like, oh, that's just a trendy thing. Why would you stand up? I mean, honest to gosh, my thing was like, why would you stand up when you could sit down? And then somewhere in there, I tried it, and the thing that blew my mind is that if it's warm enough for you not to have a shirt on and to jump in the water, like stand-up paddleboarding for someone that loves to swim is absolutely one of the greatest things. I mean, I know people do it for exercise actually I like it too because you have a little bit better view. It's a little bit active. But like for Lake Terry or even on a river, like stand-up paddleboarding is so phenomenal. Or, in the Bay Area, I'll go out on like a tidal canal. And I mean, I would like even to take it out, like to do some kayaking, even on like some, like not whitewater rafting, but like that, because I just love it so much. And that's where I was like able to get a great deal at Costco and buy it from them. But yeah, that's another boat. That's my current boat in my life. Also, yeah, like other stuff like that I usually would buy on Craigslist. But yeah, those are a few of the old boats from my life. Some of these old boats. Thanks, everybody. I want to thank recent reviews on Apple Podcasts. XOXOGGXOXO said highly recommend. Best review I can give this podcast. I never listened to a full episode, and I mean that sincerely. Does the exact job it aims to do. And if you're a first-time listener, the best advice is to trust the process and don't overthink it. Gravity 813 said, great for anxious sleepers. Severe anxiety often makes it impossible for me to shut my thoughts off long enough to sleep at night without external stimuli. The regular rhythm of the narrator's voice takes up just enough space in my head to block out my own thoughts, but leaves just enough space behind for sleepiness to creep in. I fall asleep within 20 minutes of each episode without fail. Start the intro, then the ads before I plan to be asleep. And then listen to the story when I'm trying to drift off. Definitely recommend it if you have trouble keeping your brain out of the way. Otter Gauze from the UK says, Insomnia Remedy, fantastic job providing perfect voice to listen to fall asleep. Someone else reviewed this podcast negatively for overthinkers, and I can't agree with that. I struggle to keep my mind inactive during the night, and the podcast does quite a good job keeping me off negative thoughts. I don't listen very frequently, but just the times I do, the podcast is a godsend. Just a word of advice to listeners. You don't need to listen to this and pay attention while falling asleep. Just keep it barely audible. If you can't resist whatever suits you, it's just to keep you company. This person said, I'm insufferable. And then another person says, it's too much rambling. Which I only laugh because they say the whole thing's rambling. Megan says, the best compliment I gave this podcast, I never heard a whole episode. And I may have gotten all these. Let me see here. Maybe not, though. Sleep with me is a huge help. I tried it when nothing else worked. It worked like magic. Meandering and rambling is the best. Thank everybody. There's something for everybody. D&D, Doctor Who, Great British Bake Off, 80s stuff, stories, Ray. I just love all of it. Sometimes I listen to the day in lieu of music or news, relaxing and not too distracting. You could put it on when you're doing housework, work, or hobby stuff. Lady of Hinge from Australia says, listened to a dozen of these, never made it to the end. To just keep waking up, and after it finishes, you could queue them up after episode after episode. So yeah, that's it. Thanks everybody for taking the time to review the podcast. Sleep With Me actually exists because of listener involvement, whether it's on Patreon, supporting our sponsors, or helping grow the show by just spreading the word about podcasts or our podcast. But talking to people about podcasts in general is gigantic help for everybody. I mean, you don't even have to talk about Sleep With Me because Sleep With Me is such a small subset of even people that need help falling asleep. But if you help everybody in your life discover podcasts in a soft sell way, just say, hey, let me show you where it is on your phone. Hey, search whatever you're into. I know you love newts, Nana, so let's search newts together. I'm sure there's 45 great newt podcasts out there. The best one is probably the Scott Aukerman and Adam Scott. You talking newt to me, but there's other ones out there too. So yeah, and here's a little bit about our referral program. Good night, everybody. Hey, everybody, this is Scoots with like a tuck you in message here for our bedtime story podcast. We're trying out, and I kind of said this, free way to support Sleep With Me and bedtime stories from Sleep With Me is join our referral program, sleepwithmepodcast.com/refer, R-E-F-E-R. You get rewarded for introducing people to the free version of Sleep With Me, including access to Sleep With Me Plus. But most of all, just think about what your favorite podcast is or one of your favorite podcasts, and then support that podcast. It doesn't have to be Sleep With Me, but just to support your favorite podcast because they could use your support right now. And if you decide, Sleep With Me is actually my favorite podcast, well, wow, I'm blushing, seriously, even though it's imaginary here in this context, and support it at sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus. Or listen to a show you love and see how they want to be supported. Thanks.